Good morning and welcome to the jungle. I am Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist with Liger Partners, coming to you from Liger Studios. And I am talking this morning with Dom Einhorn. He is with the Unicorn Incubator. And if you're paying any attention to Liger, you realize that we have a war on unicorns. So we have a Liger talking to a unicorn. So good morning, Dom.
Looking for a good and fair fight, Eric. Pleasure being with you.
So very nice to be with you. So tell us, to start off with, where in the world are you coming to us from?
So I'm calling in from the southwest of France, a small town named Sarlat. That's S-A-R-L-A-T. The T is silent. Some of you will get to know Sarlat by the way of the new Disney movie coming out, The Last Duel, with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, Ridley Scott production. They were in our town last year, right before and early stages during COVID. Doing a mega production, Disney production. The movie's been slightly delayed as a result of COVID. We're 2 hours east of Bordeaux, an hour and a half north of Toulouse, in a department called the Dordogne, which is a beautiful department. We have the highest density of medieval castles anywhere in the world.
Oh, nice.
1,002 of them in a 25-mile radius.
1,002 in a 25-mile radius?
That's right. So, yeah. And we launched Unicorn here. Unicorn is a play on words because my last name in German, Einhorn, means unicorn in English, number one. And obviously, that's when we get into a fight between the Ligers and the unicorns. Number two, we know what we're talking about there.
Well, we're named after a movie called Napoleon Dynamite. So in the movie,
remember that?
Talks about ligers, and it's a combination of a lion and a tiger, and we're a combination of strategy and execution. So we came up with Liger, and you've been in marketing. You and I were talking about an event you have, which we'll talk about later in the call, about people coming to you too late and trying to get something done, and you'll have firms that say that they can do it, and we just know you can't. Like, if you got something in a week, you should have come to us 3 months, 6 months ago to get that thing sort of promoted. It's very hard to get marketing to happen overnight. So talking about Unicorn Incubator. So for people who may not know really what the term incubator means, tell us, define what you're doing and where you kind of live in the overall startup and business.
Sure. Well, the easiest way to explain it is by drawing a parallel to the hospital incubators. You have a premature baby that's born. It's usually put into an incubator. The intent of that incubator is to ensure survival and to basically make sure that that baby is safe, sound, can grow up to be a normal human being. And that's pretty much what we're doing with startups. At the initial stage, the onset, startups tend to be weak. They tend to be frail. There tends to be a lot of friction. They lack certain skill sets that we provide as a part of the ecosystem that we put at their disposal. On the legal side, on the accounting side, very often on the marketing sales side, as well as on the development side, because most of the companies, more of the startups that we incubate are in the tech space. In fact, all of them are.
Okay. Yeah, I was about to ask if you had a kind of a specific focus, because some do. Like, there's one not far from us that focuses on food startups. So they look at organic food and things, but yours are primarily in the high tech arena.
We're in tech, so tech, white tech. So anything from AI, AR, VR, digital media, fintech, educational technologies, health technologies, and slowly but surely agri-tech as well, because we are in a rural area.
Okay, nice. Yeah, another time that you and I have a conversation, I did a project with an agricultural client, and I've ridden tractors all over France and Germany and all kinds of places. So,
I'm sure they were John Deere tractors, though.
No, they were not. They were Massey Ferguson and Fendt and those kind of things. So yeah, but so tell me, how did you end up in this space? Like, if I look at your background, how did you end up in an incubator?
Yeah, so I started as a startup entrepreneur myself. I moved from France to the US in early 1993 to launch a digital media startup when the internet was called the information superhighway, for those of you who are old enough to remember.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as a search engine. There was a human curated directory called Yahoo. And at that point in time, in 1993, 1994, if you had looked me up by name, I was one of 3 people listed as digital marketing consultants. 6 months later, I was no longer there. So I'm pretty much a dinosaur in this space. And I think the advantages of being able to sit on both sides of the table. So I started out, seeking angel investors early on in the 90s, and then over the last 6, 7, 8 years, I've morphed slowly into an angel investor myself. And I realized that there was a big gap between the two worlds of, on one side, the startups looking for financing, and on the other side, the angel investors willing to provide that type of financing, risk capital, as long as the right conditions are aligned. And I call this the expectation gap, where typically startuppers are broadcasting on FM and investors are listening to AM.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a good situation. So things have improved incrementally, I would say, over the last 25 years, but not radically. And what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to bring the two together and bridge that gap.
So you still see that? Because I mean, my background's similar to you. I'm a recovering technologist. So I started my career running development shops, and I did a .com in '95. So just a little bit behind you. I tell people we were the first non-porn website on the internet making money. We were selling public records, so public record search engine, so you could go and find out if your neighbor had ever filed bankruptcy or UCCs or liens, primarily focused at private investigators. And so then owned a research company, and now kind of on the marketing side. And being in that kind of incubated space, it's interesting to me that there still is that gap, right? Like that connection doesn't happen the way that we would think, because we've been doing this a while now. It's been a minute.
We have, and I think it's due to the fact that we are mostly specialists, not generalists, and you do need to have a generalist on your team, I believe. So if I look back in 1993, my first investor pitch, I was very excited. I had one investor potentially interested in investing in me in my startup. And after 10 minutes of explaining to him what it is that I was doing, his eyes started rolling over, glazing over, he started yawning. So I figured I wasn't on the right track by seeing that. Body language gave it away. And then I went quiet and let him speak. And I pretty much did the same thing 10 minutes later after he came to me and said, look, what are you doing? You're doing a seed round, pre-seed, a Series A. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Right. So yes, I think we've come, I don't want to say a long way, but we've come a way. But daily, we're seeing this disconnect still being very present in the market, and probably even more so here in Europe, Western Europe, than you would in the US.
Okay. And so tell me what you mean more about like generalist versus specialist. Is it more important?
So I think you need someone on your team, if you're looking to raise funds as a startup entrepreneur, that has knowledge on both sides of the table. Right. Yes, they need to know your product, your service, but they also need to have, they don't necessarily need to be specialists, but they need to be well-versed on the finance side and understand what the perspective of an investor is, understand that there's probably no point for you pitching a VC early on. You're much better off trying to find a like-minded angel investor that brings more than money to the table, because sometimes even if you don't raise money, he may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clients that you can bring to you relatively quickly, so you don't dilute yourself at an early stage, and you still get that revenue rolling in. You get further product market fit, further validation in the market, which sometimes goes along a lot further than a few bucks in the bank.
That is such a smart piece of advice. So finding someone who's not only investing dollars in you, but also making connections such that you go ahead and get those first paying customers. So that's a really great.
Yeah, when you and I started in this space, LinkedIn didn't exist, right? And now, if you're a little smart on LinkedIn, I do get between on a bad day or good day, depending on how I define good and bad, I get between 50 and 150 pitches a day, and I see everything, right? I get people to just send me an attachment without even a note on it. Well, that goes straight in the trash. Then I get people calling me Bob. Right. Clearly, that's the nice cut and paste. That one goes straight in the trash as well, because it was a shotgun approach. Yeah. But we have the tools now to kind of like zero in on a potential partner more so than an investor. Clearly you have tools like AngelList, LinkedIn, and others that allow you to also identify the right type of investor and kind of get an idea of what their Rolodex looks like based upon their reach, based upon their influence. So when you're out there looking for an investor, look beyond that. Look for that Rolodex. Look for that added value. Look for the guy who you want to get in bed with for the next 5 years. Because one of the first questions I ask myself, even though I haven't been fishing in 20 years, is would I go fishing with that guy? And if the answer is no, it probably stops right there, because you kind of like joined at the hip for a very long period of time. If you're funding a pre-seed startup or a seed startup, you're looking at a window of at least 5 to 7 years on average. If it happens earlier, congratulations, you get lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such good advice, because so often people think they're just looking for money, and you're really looking for so many other things as it relates to what you're doing with that. And we have Shark Tank here. You've probably seen, part of that is shopping for the right shark, because you want the person who kind of has a contextual understanding of what you're doing, can get you those first orders, get you kind of over the hump. So talk to me about how your incubator works. So is it, there's different ways of, people show up at the doorstep, they're paying for a portion of it, you're investing in them, you've got a cohort that you're doing. Like, what does that look like?
So typically we make a clear distinction between incubation and acceleration. Okay. Typically incubation, when you come to us, you got to be at least at proof of concept plus. And what I mean by that is that your product or service needs to be on the market, needs to be marketable. Okay. You got to come to us and show that you've at least been able to convince your grandmother to give you a few bucks before asking for ours, because I'm usually the first money in, either personally or with a group of co-investors that basically tag along, look at what we've at and go in. And then on the acceleration side, we're primarily specializing in rapid customer acquisition and scaling on that front. So assuming everything checks out, assuming you have a product, you have an MVP in the market, there is real product market fit, which we validate with some internal tools, we quickly try to get to the acceleration stage. Best way to illustrate what I mean by that is, let's assume you have a mobile app that solves a problem in the marketplace. Could be B2B, could be B2C. You may have been able to secure 500,000 downloads on your own. You may be ranked number 56 for your choice keywords. After 2 or 3 months of working with us, we're currently number 1 for 5,000 keywords in the App Store. We have a whole team working on the ASO side, and we grow that universe of downloads organically on an industry and on a language agnostic basis. We do ASO in 17 different languages as it stands. We look at the language component as an incremental way of acquiring new customers cheaper and more efficiently and more quickly. So for example, in some domains where we start with English first, we quickly add on French and German, and we're able to double the daily rate of organic downloads by way of just adding these 2 languages and optimizing for search within the app stores. So that's just one concrete example of what we do on the acceleration side. So
you being the number 3 digital marketing person in 1994 has really assisted you. So it sounds like you're playing a very strong marketing approach with this.
I think what it taught me, and that's probably one important takeaway, one important lesson, is rather than becoming a trend chaser, focus on what does not change, because that's a mainstay. And you don't need a crystal ball to figure out what we're going to be doing still tomorrow, next year. We're going to get up in the morning, take a shower, we're going to have breakfast, we're going to put some clothes on, we want to be entertained, we want to be educated, et cetera, et cetera. So just figure out a better way of bringing those kind of services with less friction to the people.
Yeah, that's really smart. And when we work with clients, we also are looking at macro and micro trends. So what are the things that are going on anyway that you can participate in? Because the chances of you making or creating your own, it takes a lot of money, or you have to have done something sort of terrible.
No question. I mean, everything we do on the customer acquisition side is driven by trends, and the primarily search trends. So we have privileged access to some great search tools that show us what people are searching for. So everything is intent driven, right? So instead of building something in the hopes that it will come, we know they're coming, and that's the reason why we're building it, right? There is a ready market there. And that's also a piece of advice I would give to a lot of startup entrepreneurs that are building something, whatever it is to make sure that there is a ready and willing market, ready and willing to pay for your product or service prior to you going on a 2-year binge, wasting your resources, wasting your cash, your grandmother's cash, as we mentioned earlier, and then realizing, wow, there is no market for it after all. So there's one productivity hack that we use internally whenever we launch or decide to launch a new product or service, is we go to our existing client base. If we don't have an existing client base, or if you don't have an existing client base, you can do it anyway. You can actually go out to the cold market and say, we understand, Mr. Client, Mr. Prospective Client, that you're facing these and these challenges. This is the solution we are working on. It's currently in beta. It's not ready yet. This is the problem that it will solve. What we're trying to do is we're trying to give you early access, beta access for 10 cents on the dollar. Okay. If you can sell that concept, you're onto something, right? Yeah. Because you get early buy-in at the onset in the initial iteration stage, and sometimes you build some great client relationships because they actually help you iterate and pinpoint what it is you should be doing and not be doing.
Well, and it's so smart because you're, instead of asking quote unquote for money or for a sale, you're asking for advice, right? You're asking someone to help you assist put the product together. They're sort of, so it's a really, really great way of looking at it. You have a specific event coming up in the fall, so you want to talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So in the fall, we're launching the Startup Supercup. You can go to startupsupercup.com. It's an event that will be held here in Sarlat, in the southwest of France, on October 1, 2, and 3. It's a weekend. It will bring together roughly 1,000 angel investors and funds and angel networks, over 100 media entities from 32 countries so far, including podcasters, by the way, but also some high-flying ones. And then there will be a grand prize awarded to 120 or so participating startups, and also domain-specific, category-specific awards. For the best AI company startup, for the best AR VR startup, et cetera, et cetera. A jury is going to be composed 50% of professionals and 50% open to everyone to vote. So democratize the process. On Saturday, we'll actually decentralize the event away from the Cultural Arts Center into the center of town, medieval town. It's like walking into the 12th century when you go to Sala in the center of town. Yeah. It's where Joan of Arc was filmed, by the way. When they filmed the movie, all they did is take the cars out. Everything else stayed the same. So we will actually have a huge event on that Saturday, which is also a market day, which is a big deal in the south of France, and let startuppers pitch in front of the crowds, larger crowds, and explain what it is that they do and what problems they look to solve.
Very nice. So does everybody win a castle?
Probably could think of that. It's not a bad idea. What we'll do, for example, as one of the prize giveaways, instead of handing over a cup, your typical cup, a close friend of mine is actually a multiple-time world champion in chainsaw sculpture. So it will not be a Liger. It will be a unicorn that will be carved in wood and handed out. So a very unique piece of art that will be done on premises during the 3-day event.
Very cool. Well, great. It's been fun talking with you. I really love sort of the startup incubator space. That's always sort of been my first passion. So it's good to have that conversation. And my wife is dying to get back to the south of France, so that may be the opportunity for us to come see you guys.
VIP invite. I think you will like what you see. If you don't like good red wines, if you don't like good food or anything of that sort, don't come.
Yeah, and if you don't like those things, then what's wrong with you? Well, it's been great talking with you this morning. I appreciate your time. So
thank you. Likewise. Thanks, Eric. Have a great day.
Yeah, we've been talking with Dom Einhorn. He is with Uniqorn Incubator and Accelerator in the south of France. You've been listening to The Jungle. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Visionary Partner at Liger Partners. And thanks so much for tuning in. We will post all the information on how to get in touch with Dom and his event this fall in the show notes.